Hey YouTube, how you guys doing? It's Vincent here, and today I'm gonna be finishing up my classic Maiden discography. And today I'm gonna be talking about the legendary Seventh Son of a Seventh Son. Now as I mentioned in my Somewhere in Time review, this is the point where the band started to introduce a lot of different elements into their music and just start experimenting, started expanding, started being very creative and just really experimental. And this album in particular is a lot more well received than Somewhere in Time. I don't want to make it sound like people hate that album, because they don't, but it just doesn't get talked about as much as this album does. A lot of people consider this Maiden's best work, although I feel like everybody has a different opinion on which 80s album is the best. It's like every place I go to review, or not to review, to read reviews or watch reviews or whatever, someone thinks Number of the Beast, Peace of Mind, Power Slave, Somewhere in Time, and Seventh Son is their best. There's really not one clear distinction. It's not like there's one album. Maybe you could say Number of the Beast, but there's really not one album that everybody thinks it's their best. It's like each album has like a bunch of really fanatical people who just love it, and a lot of people love this album, and I could see why. It's a fantastic record. It took me a while to get into, but once I finally got it, to use a sort of pretentious kind of term, it definitely showed itself to me as a phenomenal album. So let's talk about the big cow in the room. Is that it's a concept album, as some of you may have been able to tell by the album title. It is based off of the story, the folklore, whatever, of the seventh son of a seventh son, which is this kid who is born with these special powers, and he doesn't know he has them, and evil and good are just like fighting over him, and he meets all these kind of mystical figures and then learns about how to use his powers and all this stuff. And it may sound really cliched and cheesy, but when you listen to the album, you get into the atmosphere and the mysticism that the band is projecting on you, and it's a really fun album to listen to. It just kind of brings you to this other world of all these kind of fantasy-esque, whimsical, mystical kind of lyrical themes, and it sets up a great atmosphere. And the thing that does that, besides the lyrics, are the keyboards. In Somewhere in Time, Iron Maiden just used guitar synthesizers, and they said that they liked them, but it was really hard to tour with them. And obviously, since Maiden toured all the time, I would imagine you would want to make it as easy as possible. So they ditched that and just got keyboards. And that made it a lot easier for the band, and it has a more of a, what's the word? It's not as dated as Somewhere in Time sounded, because it's just straight keyboards, and that, pertains to any time period, obviously. I don't have to go into detail about that. And the cool thing is, as I said in Somewhere in Time, the band, or did I mention that? I hope I mentioned this point, because it was a big point, that, I'm mentioning it now, another album, whatever, fuck it. The synths on that album, or the guitar synths, didn't ruin the album. It wasn't like it was so synthy where it drowned out the actual sound. It was still that classic Maiden sound, just with that enhancement to it, and this is the same deal. The synthesizers and keyboards never overstay their welcome. It's never like, okay, we get it, you know what I mean? Synths, great. It's always really tasteful, and it's always perfectly fit in. You know what I mean? It never feels like it's too much, where they're like, listen to these synths, you know what I mean? It's very light, but it's the perfect amount. It's not too light where you forget they're there. So I think the synths add a really great element to the album, and it gives it its distinctive feel, as opposed to all of, Maiden's other records. And there's a couple things that it makes this album stand out that are almost sort of hard to explain. And I know that sounds weird, but when you listen to it, there's just something about it that just sounds like nothing Maiden ever did before. I always say in all my Maiden reviews, or most of them, that everything is big, everything is epic, everything is really grandiose in its scope. But this album takes that and runs with it, man. Like this album just sounds so kind of like it's almost like reading a book or something, where you're reading it, and kind of a stupid example, but you're reading it, and when you read a book, you're imagining what's happening in the book. The same type of thing happens with this album. You're just imagining all these kind of images of all these really cool kind of mystic scenes and characters and themes, and it just sets up this atmosphere that kind of carries you through the record, and it's great. And another thing is the concept. Wow, it's gonna be a long review, I can tell. The concept never becomes too heavy. Well, sorry, I don't know if you heard the noise, but I think the dryer or something went on. That was a good shit. Anyway, and it just turned off. The damn it, that threw me off. The concept is never too heavy, where it feels like if you were to just pick up the album where somebody left off in the middle of it, you wouldn't be lost. And that sounds weird, but that's really the best way I can explain it. All the songs have a theme, which is talking about the seventh son. And they're connected in a way where they make sense. And it's the type of album that's extremely, which I guess every album in a certain sense is like this, but it's one of the most satisfying albums to just sit down, close your eyes, and listen to all the way through. Because it's kind of like a puzzle, you know what I mean? Each song just fits in perfectly and progresses the story of the seventh son of a seventh son. And that's a kind of interesting thing, because it kind of contradicts what I just said about how you don't really need to know the previous song to get what's going on in the next song, but it obviously it would be like kind of loose. But yeah, the concept is loose, so it never feels truly pushed on you. It's not like you feel like it's sort of a burden to listen to, if that makes any sense, because there's just so much shit you gotta process. It's always just a theme of the seventh son of a seventh son, and what he goes through. And the cool thing is they never mention names. They never mention, the seventh son could be anybody, you know what I mean? And I find that really cool. So, I talked enough about the concept, the theme, the atmosphere, the mysticism, the feel of the album, which is, in my opinion, its best merit. So let's talk about flow and production. Production on this album is fantastic. Steve Harris's bass sounds unbelievably crisp and audible, clean and clear. You hear everything that's going on, and it really, like all Maiden records, helps give the songs a kind of bottom to them, which is great. Nico's drums sound fantastic. They sound they have a lot more pop to them than they did on the previous releases. I felt like which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but on previous releases his snare sounds kind of flat, but this one it's a real, like, boom, there's a real pop to it, which enhances the drum sound a lot. Everything sounds really clear. He uses the hi-hat a lot in this album, which I always talk about his, like, fetish for using the ride cymbal on, you know, Power Slave and basically every other Maiden album he drummed on up until this point. So it's nice to, because I feel like the songs are a lot heavier on this album, and I feel like he brings that out by just crashing that hi-hat, and it gives the songs a real, like, kind of an edge to them that the previous albums don't have as far as Nico's concerned, although his drumming was always great. The guitars sound fantastic. They kind of remind me of Somewhere in Time, except obviously they don't have the synths connected to them. They sound very, very bright and clean and crisp. And the solos are great, the riffs are fantastic, and of course Adrian and Dave are always at the top of their game, so nothing much to say. Bruce's vocals are awesome. That's really all I gotta say. He sounds more aggressive here than he does on previous releases. He still has that, you know, he has that, you know, that amazing range, but on songs like Moonchild, he's almost like growling, as much as Bruce Dickinson can growl, you know, and I don't want to make it sound like they're that aggressive, but he's kind of snarly as he's singing it, which is really cool. Production's great, which is fantastic. I swear, Maiden and Martin Birch just had a way of producing records fantastically. They're always on point with everything. The flow is so good, because it's a concept album, so it needs to have a good flow. If it didn't, this album would not be as good as it is, and the flow is great. Starts off with Moonchild, which just basically sets up the atmosphere of the album, telling you about the seventh son of a seventh son, how he was born, and how good and evil are trying to claim him and use them, or use him, rather, excuse me, for their gain, you know what I mean? And it just kind of takes you through these stories that, like I said, are connected but not so tight-knit where you wouldn't know what's going on if you heard it just separately. So the concept work is great. Yeah, the flow, and I feel like each song, it kind of just progresses. It's like when you hear a song coming directly after the last one, you're like, okay, this makes perfect sense. Like, of course, it would be this song, you know what I mean? If the order was reversed, it just wouldn't be as kind of precise as it is. Once you hear the album a few times, you're like, man, it's so perfect that they put that song directly after that song. And it, you know, obviously, like I said, the story just follows until the very end when, I don't know if I'd call this a spoiler, but the seventh son of a seventh son dies. So, sorry if I ruined that for anybody, but if you're watching this, you probably already know about this album. So, yeah. Seventh Son, this album is a masterpiece. It is. I can definitely get behind people who say it's the best album. I don't think that they have a best album in the 80s. I love all of them, although I might be inclined to say that Power Slave's the best. It'd be hard. But this album is awesome. Oh, and it was released 1988. Sorry, forgot to say that. I don't know why. But yeah, the album just, it's truly, I think, Maiden's creative peak. You know, and obviously we know that they would kind of go downhill from here. Not forever, but for a little while. And yeah, I'm done. Yeah. This has been a lot of fun. Classic Maiden is a series I enjoyed making a lot. I know that maybe some of you, and I think one of you, you know who I'm talking about. You know who you are. I don't know if you watched to the end, but there was this one guy, I'm not going to mention his name or whatever, because I'm not going to be an asshole like that, but he kept busting my balls about how I kept releasing Maiden videos, and he wants me to review good stuff, but I guess now he's getting his wish, because I'm done. But I'm going to be bringing you guys a lot more reviews after this. Fuck, 15 minutes, damn it. I'd like to thank you for almost 85 subs. I'm pushing towards 100. When I get there, it's going to be awesome. I'm going to feel like I am just on top of the world when that happens. But I thank you for sticking with me, through this whole 7-video series. I'm sure I'll be doing more of these in the future. And 15 minutes. Bye, guys.